Passage Press is a small alt-right book publisher. They released a collection of essays by Curtis Yarvin, who wants to replace democracy with monarchism, another collection by Steve Saylor, who makes up racist pseudoscience. There's a magazine edited by Raw Egg Nationalist. By the way, that's not me making up an insult. He calls himself that. He got his following from a blog. People know him by his internet name. The nationalist part is self-explanatory. The raw egg thing is because he believes pseudoscience about the carnivore diet. Passage Press also sells a collection of H.P. Lovecraft stories. That makes complete sense. Lovecraft was an incredibly racist piece of shit, and they're public domain, so why not? Anyone can legally print and sell them. There's this collection of short stories by guys like Bronze Age Pervert and Zero H.P. Lovecraft. Not the Cthulhu guy. Zero H.P. Lovecraft is a deactivated blogger who called Black Lives Matter a religion. They've got a memoir written by a monarchist who fought communism, and a graphic novel version of the same memoir written by a monarchist who fought communism, and a biography of a different monarchist who fought communism, and a bunch of Hardy Boys novels, and a book by the anti-democracy philosopher Nick Land. If you recognized the name Hardy Boys, you might be thinking that one of these things is not like the others, but you'd be wrong. The Hardy Boys books are detective novels, usually aimed at middle schoolers or elementary schoolers. The franchise began almost 100 years ago. Imagine you're following a path that begins at The Tower Treasure, published in 1927, and ends at The Smuggler's Legacy, published in 2023. Culture changes over that much time. What it means to be an adult changes. What it means to be a child changes. On that path, you'll see wildly different depictions of race, gender, wealth, law enforcement, fathers, intellectual property, and nature conservation. Different expectations of how long children can focus on one thing. Different opinions about the propriety of violence in children's media, and different senses of humor. The Hardy Boys franchise is a story about teenage detectives, but it can be read as an almost 100-year-long commentary on American culture. There tends to be more than one version of characters who have been around for this long. Think about Spider-Man. There's Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Ultimate Gwen Stacy, Superior Spider-Man, 3 different live-action movie versions. You get the gist. The Hardys are no exception. The books, especially the revised versions of the original books, are their most recognizable content, but there have also been TV shows, a bunch of video games, and an official album sung by the Hardy Boys. It's bad, but it's way better than it has any right to be. The franchise began with a series called The Hardy Boys Mystery Stories, following teenage detectives Frank and Joe Hardy, the sons of a private eye named Fenton. The brothers are 1 year apart. Frank is 16, Joe is 15, but there isn't a whole lot of sibling conflict. The boys are athletic and intelligent, and they really admire their father. The opening scene of the first book has them discussing how much they want to open their own detective agency when they grow up. And even though they're still kids, they find ways to help him out and discover mysteries all by themselves. Frank and Joe are white. Their family is white. Their all-American town, Bayport, is overwhelmingly white. All of their friends are white. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty, the 1920s had a different idea of the white in-group. I am willing to acknowledge that the Hardy Boys had an Italian friend named Tony and a Jewish friend named Phil, and, you could say that that's diversity, but even then, those guys were second-level friends. Tony and Phil were on the fringe of the in-group, both in terms of race and in terms of teenage social life in Bayport. The books are attributed to Franklin W. Dixon, but in reality, they were written by a bunch of different people who published under the same fake identity. The most common author was a man named Leslie McFarlane, often basing the novels on outlines, written by Harriet Stratemeyer Adams. She was later responsible for inventing the female teenage detective Nancy Drew, who starred in the Nancy Drew mystery stories beginning in 1930. Both series would undergo a revision process beginning in 1959. A big reason was that in the 50s, TV began to compete with books for audience. The idea was that it would be harder to get attention from a child, so they made the books easier to read. Fewer big words, shorter sentences, and as a bonus, no more racial stereotypes. Parents kept complaining, so the stereotypes had to go. Which sounds good, but in practice, they just got rid of characters of color. In the first Nancy Drew novel, there's a character named Jeff who is drunk and, quote, childlike, and he speaks in a very racist portrayal of African American vernacular English. When they revised the book, they removed any sign that Jeff was black. Personally, I am white and I look white, so, don't trust me too much, but I gotta say, I don't think it's better to just have a story without black people. So now we have two types of Hardy Boys books: original mystery stories and revised mystery stories, both racist in their own special way. That was the status quo until a new book series began with the Hardy Boys Case Files number 1, Dead on Target. The series came out beginning in the late 80s, back when they were making children's toys out of RoboCop. The series got away with violence that you absolutely could not put in a book for 10-year-olds today. It begins with terrorists killing Joe's girlfriend Iola with a fucking car bomb. All of the terrorists are the same ethnic group. I'll give you 3 guesses. They're all Middle Eastern. So, blatant racial stereotype. What gives? Well, 2 things. First, there was a new publisher, Simon & Schuster. But also, it's not like revisions happened because the franchise wanted to lead the charge on civil rights. They wanted money, parents were complaining, so the company made a choice that they thought would sell. Then, a different company made a different choice that they thought would sell. Despite the more violent tone, Case Files has plenty of fun, stupid bullshit. The worst book I have ever read cover to cover is Bad Rap, where Frank and Joe investigate a murder in the New York hip-hop scene. The tag reads, "Cool is the rule when you're on a case, and danger's in your face!" Exclamation point. And I shit you not, there's fucking ninjas. Case Files and Mystery Stories came out simultaneously, but they were in separate worlds. Again, think Peter Parker and Miles Morales, although the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew don't have an equivalent to a Spider-Verse crossover. There's also Clues Brothers and then Secret Files books, which are for littler kids. They're not super important. I'm just mentioning them so people know I didn't forget. In 2005, Case Files and Mystery Stories were both canceled and replaced by Hardy Boys, Undercover Brothers, and Nancy Drew, Girl Detective. These books also got their own world and a really different tone. Mystery Stories was wholesome, Case Files was edgy, and Undercover Brothers was immature. There's jokes about poop. It's really the first Hardy Boys era that's consistently funny on purpose. Like, the ninjas in Case Files were supposed to be taken seriously. These books are being dumb for the sake of being dumb. It was the decade of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, A Series of Unfortunate Events, and Percy Jackson. Children's media being sarcastic and intentionally a little bit disgusting. It changes the narration to first person. Frank and Joe alternate between being narrators. It also leans into the idea of cool. Joe gets a blue mohawk at one point, and the brothers are undercover because they're spies. They work for a government agency called American Teens Against Crime, which is abbreviated as ATTACK. Think James Bond meets Malcolm in the Middle meets the Hardy Boys. Undercover Brothers begins with Frank skydiving to catch a criminal for pirating music. Which, like, to be fair, people cared more about music piracy in the 2000s, but still, he jumped out of a plane. I don't have time to dig too much into Nancy Drew Girl Detective. This essay will loop back around to Passage Press, which does not sell Nancy Drew books, but I'd like to point out that she doesn't get to do cool spy stuff. In the first crossover in this universe, the story begins with Frank and Joe tied up by criminals and their friends rescue them with a rifle. Then we go to Nancy's POV, where she is at a mall doing normal mall stuff. Then, in 2013, we get the Hardy Boys' adventures in the Nancy Drew Diaries. The best continuity. And I say that as someone who grew up with mystery stories. My nostalgia is for mystery stories, but Adventures is fucking great. I'm an especially big fan of the ones written by Reuben Sachs. They are legitimately good detective novels, like enough clues that you can theoretically solve the mystery on your own, but I, as an adult reader, have always been surprised. Treacherous Tide is about a coastal town dealing with an alleged shark attack, and a stand-in for Donald Trump wants to build a shark wall, and the moral of the story is that walls solve nothing, and sharks are cool and deserve conservation. But I cannot stress enough, the plot of this novel is fake Trump with a shark wall. Adventures has some wild tone shifts. I can only describe The Secret of the Red Arrow as the Hardy Boys versus the evils of the dark web, but the Reuben Sachs books, which are the best ones, bring back the wholesome tone while also letting the brothers be individual people who happen to own smartphones. The Passage Press box set contains the first 3 novels, Tower Treasure, The House on the Cliff, and The Secret of the Old Mill, but they sell the original text. To be clear, they're not selling vintage copies, they're printing new copies of the old public domain novels. They don't own the copyright. Anyone can print this stuff. The fact that the books changed is what made Passage want to get involved. Their description on their website says, the publisher began a concerted effort to rewrite the original Hardy Boys books and bring them in line with modern sensibilities. Politically incorrect content was removed. The writing was simplified, and the plots were given more of an action theme. Passage was appealing to a glorious past, stolen from us by woke culture. Basically, the reason that they sell this box set is they want to make the Hardy Boys great again. And you know what? A lot of the revisions were politically motivated. I don't deny that. But the description on Passage's website makes it sound like there was the original Hardy Boys and then the woke version, as if the franchise got pushed in one direction, when in reality, it's more of a push and pull thing. Yes, they removed a lot of the black stereotypes from the original series, but A, having fewer black characters is not less racist, and B, the racist stereotypes came back. Remember? Case Files opens up with Middle Eastern car bomb villains. It's not like when Penguin Books edited Roald Dahl novels after he died. Roald Dahl wrote James and the Giant Peach without an outline made by somebody else. I despise a lot of the ideas in his stuff, but they were art created by a single artistic vision. The Hardy Boys novels are inherently collaborative. You've got Edward Stratemeyer, who invented them, his daughter Harriet writing a lot of the outlines. You've got ghostwriters like McFarlane. The revisions just add more collaborators. It is different, but it's also more of the same. So, we know that a lot changes. Now let's talk about what stays the same. The target audience. There are comics aimed at grown-ups who read the books as kids, but the big stuff in the franchise, The 4 series we've reviewed are all aimed at children. They are silly and fun, and not trying to make a big philosophical point about human nature or nihilism against moral realism or anything like that. They exist to convince parents to buy them. There can be a political agenda. The official Hardy Boys Detective Handbook was written in collaboration with a real-life cop, Captain Spina of the Newark Police Department, who hopes to, quote, have this book arouse the interest of our young people so that someday they may join the ranks of those who fight never-ending war against America's #1 enemy, the criminal. But most of the time, the people behind Franklin W. Dixon aren't trying to make a point. They just want you to have fun so they can get paid. The art historian Jules David Brown writes that if you want to understand a society, quote, artifacts that express unconsciously are more useful as objective cultural indexes. He goes on to say that when a culture is less self-conscious, it is potentially more truthful. So, basically, when you want to understand a society, look at the stuff it makes that it doesn't think is important. Because when a society isn't actively trying to tell you something, it isn't actively trying to lie. The Hardy Boys are some of the most popular, enduring characters in American fiction. Their success tells us something about this country and what it values. In the original mystery stories, Frank and Joe are good white kids who make their dad proud in the all-American town where there is no moral dilemma about searches without warrants. It's easy to see why a conservative would like this world. Now, I'm not saying it lines up perfectly with monarchist thought. The guys published by Passage don't all agree with each other, so don't expect all their books to be extensions of the same worldview. Rather, think of them as products meant to appeal to the same buyer. Really bad analogy coming up, but Starbucks understands that people who want coffee might also want a muffin, and so even though coffee and muffins are different things made from different materials, the same business has them both. Passage understands that the same buyer would probably like both a fascist memoir and a book about white youth who embody masculine ideals. Let me be clear. I like the franchise. I paid an embarrassing amount of money for a vintage copy of the original Tower Treasure. I left the laughter in this recording because I want to show you that I have fun talking about the Hardy Boys. If you like them, I am not telling you to abandon your hobby. There is no morally pure entertainment, and even if there was, watching it would do nothing. Activism happens in food kitchens and on the streets, not on your couch. And I think you will live a fuller, stabler, more interesting life if you're aware of the implicit messages in stuff that's supposed to be fun. Having fun is not a good reason to stop thinking. Written and recorded by Nate Connolly.